The blue line is Volusia County School District. The yellow line is the state of Florida, and then the green line is South Daytona Elementary. And so, and I apologize, I'm not really sure why I don't have 07 for South Daytona Elementary. We must not have been able to get our hands on it easily. In any case, if you look just at Florida and the Volusia County School District in 2007, you can see that we're very close. The state of Florida was at 46% of its students, public school students, were on free and reduced lunch. And here in Volusia, 44% of our students were on free and reduced lunch. If you look at the 10 years since that time, what is dramatic, unfortunate, and I think says a lot about the issues that we face is that the number of students on free and reduced lunch here in Volusia County went up by more than 20 points. Actually, it's at 20 points this year. Last year it was at 21 points. We're now at 64% of our students in Volusia County. So even though presumably the recession is over and there's all this good news coming to us about our economy, I think what this tells us is that wages continue to be low in Volusia County, and that hits our students especially very hard. And if you can look at how it's affecting your community and our school here, South Daytona Elementary, you can see that when we did that redistricting associated with the areas west of Nova Road, you can see that the number and percent of students on free and reduced lunch dropped. It went from 62% down to 49% in 09, up to 55%, and then we hit a high in 2011 of 71%, and quite frankly, it's really not dropped. I would say that the drop in 2012 is an anomaly, because if you look at the other numbers, it's increased. And this current year, again, this is a measurement taken from the 20-day. This is a number that will fluctuate throughout the school year, but we're at 77% of our students at South Daytona Elementary are on free and reduced lunch, which does make it a Title I school, which does help because it brings extra funds and extra resources to the school, but I still think that it is an area of concern when we recognize how many of our students are in need. That concludes the portion of my presentation where I was trying to provide you some information just on enrollment in general.
Good evening. I'm going to provide some information on the history of the school grade and talk about some supports that we have in place. There are two slides that are about the history of the school grade, and that's for a very specific reason. You can see from 2012 to 2014, schools were graded using the FCAT assessment. And so even in this slide, you can see that during the final years of the implementation of the FCAT assessment, the school grade did fluctuate. And at that time, schools were graded on a point system based on performance on the FCAT assessment. So that's what the 454, 430, and 495 were points that were earned towards a grade. In 2015, we not only changed the way that we grade our schools, but we also changed the assessment itself. At that time, students were taking the FSA, which we still take, the Florida Standards Assessment. What's also important to note is that in the summer of 2012, we began transitioning from the Florida Next Generation Sunshine State Standards to the Florida Standards, what we have now. Beginning in 2015 was when we were tested. This makes comparing data from year to year much more difficult. So if you're looking at comparing school performance from 2012 to last year, that would be rather difficult because we were not only changing standards, we were changing the assessment as well. As we began to learn more and more about our new standards, which were increasingly more rigorous, we saw our own school's performance in Volusia County mirror what research tells us will. Dr. Michael Fullen has termed a implementation dip, is what he calls it. When you implement a new program or a new system or any big change, there will be a period where there is a dip as you learn those standards, as you become more comfortable with the standards, and as you become more comfortable with the test. This slide looks a little more deeply into what we're here tonight about, and that is last year's school grade. This provides an overview of the components of the school grade. The three areas that are in blue are the three areas that really require our focus and attention as we talk about the supports and interventions and scaffolding that we put in place. All of these percentages, when we look at those students who scored a level 3 or higher, learning gains, there are 3 ways to make a learning gain for students, and then specifically those 2 areas in blue, the lowest quartile. Those are of the students who perform in the lowest 25%. When you look really closely at the lowest quartile, we did some analysis. In order for the school grade to be a C, 3 additional students would have needed to make a learning gain in the lowest quartile, 3 students. In math, 2 students. In order to get a B, 2 students per class in English Language Arts, and 1 per class in math. So we looked at supports, scaffolding, intervention, all of these things came to mind when we looked at how as a district we would support our South Daytona family. In 2016-17, a teacher on assignment was added to the staffing allocation formula for elementary schools which had an enrollment of 850 or more. South Daytona did qualify for that additional teacher on assignment, and he is here tonight. In 2017-2018, again, that position was earned for South Daytona, and as an intervention, an assistant principal was added, and specifically an assistant principal with experience in instruction. The supports listed here have been tailored to meet the unique needs of South Daytona. Some supports that are on here were added last year. New this year is the area superintendent for transformation, Ms. Rose Rowland, and an additional assistant principal, Melissa Martin. Support from district curriculum specialists and the district lead liaison, Ms. Lindy Gepford, have intensified, and full days of support are provided at least weekly. At this time, we're going to talk about how moving forward. I'll turn it over to Ms. Rose to talk about moving forward, and then open it up for discussion.
Thank you for the presentation. If we could go back to the previous slide. When you look at for instance, what we did with the area superintendent, we created that position. And in the past, our area superintendents oversaw 35 schools. This superintendent specifically oversees 10 schools. She's in the school every week to offer support and basically overcome barriers that the school may be facing, as they're working on their transition. With Ms. Geffert, she's in the school every week to work with the teachers and the professional learning communities where they meet and to work on strategies. Our district curriculum support, in every subject area, for instance, in reading and in science and social studies, there is a specialist. The specialists in those areas are in South Daytona 1 day a week. That's 20% of their work week is at South Daytona, you know, as a direct intervention from the district. They're there to support the teachers, also provide professional development. You can go to the next slide. When I was a principal of a D school. And when the grade was raised to the letter of a C, all support from the district went away. All that support that we needed. And we all know the story, you backslide. So what I want to express to the city leaders, what we're going to do in Volusia County, we are not going to take those supports that you saw. This is part of that 3 to 4 year plan. We are not going to pull those back once the school obtains a C, B, A. We want the school, we have to build on what we're doing. So that is our district commitment to you. Also, we're going to continue to pursue grants that can be used on behalf of the school. We're going to target certain areas where we can bring in additional funds to assist the school. And after the school grade is released in the summer, I will come before City Council and I will go over that school grade and show you that our commitment is to the success of South Daytona. And so at this time, if you would like to ask any questions, make comments,
You might introduce Carl, Tom.
Oh.
He doesn't need it.
Well, this is Mr. Persis, and as I told you, he ran into some traffic. I'm so glad, you know, he was able to make it
Without
here.
having an accident. And,
Yes.
glad to be here. Glad to be back here, I should say. You know, Joe, since you mentioned my name, I can speak a little bit. I actually cut my educational teeth right here at South Daytona Elementary. My first student internship was at South Daytona Elementary School. Jack Shep was the principal then.
What year was that, Carl?
It was 1976, I believe it was. I think it was. And I remember teaching first grade, and I forget the lady's name, but she got married during the internship, and I thought I was doing such a great job as an intern that she extended her honeymoon longer and left me alone with those children, all 36 of those first graders. I'll never forget her for that. But anyway, loved it here, and I do know where Elizabeth Lane is, and Graham Avenue, and Bryan, and Magnolia, and a lot of other streets that I walked around here when I was interning here. So I have very fond memories of this school. The school is near and dear to my heart, and which is why I'm so happy to hear the superintendent say that we're not going to abandon you. Whether this school this year received an A grade, which it should, and should, if not this year, soon, that the district is with you all the way. So I'm very, very proud of our effort.
When we met the other day, we had a conversation, and you quoted me that, I said, look, 3 to 4 years. I guess what I'm here asking at this moment is there a plan? In my former life, you know, every once in a while we would pull out a plan and we would look at it and we would review it and we would make it stronger, we would add this or take this away. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I'm asking tonight is what is the plan for South Daytona Elementary? I mean, this looks good, mm-hmm. Okay? I appreciate this, and I appreciate the time people took to put this together. But let's get down to the chalk and the erasers, if you will, and tell me what you're going to do at South Daytona Elementary to help these folks get it to an A school.
Okay, I will have Teresa Marks answer that question, because she's as she oversees curriculum and instruction in Volusia County, she has worked these plans at several schools, so she's best to answer.
Certainly. And I think a part of the reason I was asked to go to this role was a part of what we did at Atlanta High School. terms of increasing what was happening there with student engagement. The graduation rates there have continued to increase, their performance levels, and students finding things that are of interest to them. Every year we review what's happening at our schools that, and their performance. We call what we call a tiered system of support. And we review what it is that's needed. And a part of what you see in this slide, and it doesn't jump out at you because to know that a district curriculum person is there once a week doesn't really tell you what they're doing. What they are doing is working side by side with teachers. They may be working with them during planning time. They may be working with them directly in their classroom because, as Ms. Hazel mentioned, the increasing level of rigor of the standards that we have from our state are such that we need to do things a little bit differently, and we recognize that. So part of the plan, with all of this support, Lindy Geffert is there not only to meet with the teachers and provide another additional layer of support, but to bring information back to the district to say, hey, they are needing more of this. And it doesn't matter whether it's a physical plant concern that goes to our chief operating officer, Mr. Aiken, or whether, again, it's another curriculum instructional type of need. That was in part why we hand selected the new assistant principal, because a part of what we realized is that there's a great staff at South Daytona, but what would be additional support is somebody who's been in a role, that job role, and who has worked at schools that has been a Title I school, worked at a school where she has worked directly with teachers to help bring up their level of instruction and engagement of those students. And none of that is done alone. It has to be done with support. And so that's a part of when we see the need, as we have here, when we see this need, then that's why we are here. Now, I'm just going to tell you, Mr. Russell hasn't increased my staff by 20%, even though they are here 20% of their week, and that's every week. And some of them, quite frankly, are on that campus more than once a week. And that is all done in the effort to provide the support, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the area of exceptional student education, it doesn't matter whether it's in the area of reading, writing, or their art teacher. There are people there who are supporting these teachers to help move them, give them the support that they need in order to give the students the support that they need. It's always challenging. It's always challenging. And I'm going to echo what Mr. Persis said, having been in this community. The love this community has for their children is outstanding. I worked with Mr. Bartholomew and had a couple of his children go through Atlantic while I was there. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad. I'm glad to see you. But building that community, that's part of what South Daytona is that community that not only cares, but that community that continues to support their school. And so we are working with the school, working with the teachers, working with the students, working with leadership to continue to develop the best plan we can. And it doesn't stay the same. I'm going to tell you, we meet weekly to review what has happened this past week. Is there something else that needs to be done? Or is there something where we feel like, wow, we really hit that and we can move on to the next thing? So weekly, we are reviewing that plan. It's not a one and done. It's what do we need to do now? And what do we need to continue? Does that begin to answer your questions?
A little bit. If I can digress just a little bit, when the construction started in '05, there was a gate there in South Daytona Elementary, and that gate was open when I went to South Daytona Elementary in the '60s. Sir, I didn't have you.
You missed a good intern.
But I talked to Tom Novotny, and they were going to close that gate. And then I talked to Tim Huth, and I said, what do we got to do to keep this gate open? And I called them, and I says, what do we got to do? And the deal was that you had to have an officer there because of security to keep that gate open. And some folks in this room will tell you what happened is I stood there every day from 2006 or 7 until I retired in 2013, and I knuckle bumped, and I tied shoelaces, and I handed out pencils. So the love for that school runs very, very deep, not only with this council, but with everybody in this room. And if it wasn't for the support of the city and the manager and my whole department at that time, we wouldn't have been as involved as we were. Some of my single guys would show up to help me there, and I kind of figured out why, because they would have coffee later, apparently. But that's a little tongue-in-cheek with some of them, but it happens. But I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is how can we get more involved? Citizens Alert makes donations. We bring principal in and we give donations. The Lions Club gives donations. Those are two organizations that I'm a member of. But I look across South Daytona, and it's not just those two organizations. It's everybody in this room. It's everybody in this community that will be there. So when the D grade came out, it was like a slap in the face. It was cold water on the shower. I mean, how do you bring this back up? And that's why we asked this. That's why we wrote the letter. I got phone calls. Everybody on this council got phone calls. Mr. Yarbrough got phone calls from other people and us. So we want to see it change.
Yes.
We want to see, and we want to know how we can help. The 3 to 4 years was a goal. It's a plan. Show me again something, because we're all sitting back going, well, let's see how it happens this year. See what happens this year. We're in the school. We are engaged. I know Tony is there every day. It's not cheap, but he's there. So I guess that's why we asked for this workshop. How can we get more involved?
I would say one area, and this had a direct impact on those scores. With South Daytona, there is, as with all Volusia County schools, there's an issue with chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 10% of the school year. That's 18 of the 180 days. That's 2 days a month. South Daytona has a very high chronic absentee rate, and there's that lower quartile, if we can go back. The lower quartile in ELA and math, there's a direct correlation. If you're not in math class, you're not going to learn math.
Sure.
And so what could help, it would help us if the city, every now and then on its webpage, would encourage parents having their children, making sure the parents are sending their children to school. We also believe when you send out, I don't know, do you have your own utilities?
We do.
If you could send a flyer every now and then when you send the bill. And as you go into the Rotary and the Kiwanis and the different organizations that you mentioned, I think it's very important for parents and grandparents and employers and civic leaders to say to the citizens, let's get our kids to school. That's where they need to be. I think that, Mr. Mayor, would help us immensely. Let's just put this in perspective. 2 years ago in Volusia County, 9,700 students were chronically absent. And last year we began our intervention, attendance intervention, and the numbers went up to 11,000. 1/6 of South Daytona students are chronically absent. So that's one area I think, because you're a leader and people see you in the community and at the ballpark and all that, and just having those types of conversations, I think, would help the district. That's one area, specifically.
I guess that's what I was looking for. Give us something to take back to the organizations, and this is enlightening.
If you could, is it possible you could, excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible you could share the names or the addresses or anything? We only have, your district,
Yeah.
zoning district is substantially larger than
Sure.
our corporate limits, as you know.
I know with the SRO at the school, within the city of South Daytona, could work with, attendance.
Okay, we can work to, he'll know who it is.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good enough, thank you.
And then, for everybody every day, That's our motto for attendance, everybody, every day. All right, and I'm going to tell you, I'm a grandparent now. I have grandbaby number 4 is on the way. And two of them live in Virginia, and I want to see them. So I have to catch myself and stop myself from saying, sure, take the first grader out, bring her on down to see her Mimi. And we find, honestly, the data is showing us that it's kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Those are where our highest absences are. Everybody, every day.
I'm a retired teacher. I had taught 34 years, but I do remember we used to have, and even in my classroom, incentive programs. Are there anything like incentives, prizes, like if a kid is there? Okay, so, yeah, and what are those? Can somebody, I mean, that to me was...
Ms. Bruner, could you share with us your...
Right now, we do a perfect attendance poster in each classroom, and when the whole class is there that day, they get to color in a letter, starting with the word perfect. Once that word is filled in, there's a reward for the students, a popsicle party or a popcorn party. And then when they fill in attendance, same thing, and then we just start over again, just reuse that laminated large poster. That's currently in place. We continue to talk about ways to incentivize the kids and want them to wake up and want to come to school and be there on time. And that's the current tangible that we have for attendance. We also have, it's more reactive, but just a process where teachers get other school staff involved to support kids that are chronically absent and put them through a process where we're talking specifically about those kids that missed more days, got almost to the chronically absent benchmark, to contact that parent, have the parent into the school, to sit and talk with that parent and develop a plan and find out why the child is absent from school. So one's the incentive program, the other one is more addressing individually, teacher by teacher, along with other school staff. And then we're assigned a social worker, Janie Majors, who works with Chad Miller, primarily our TOA, and I think one other person, but anyway, to address those kids that are struggling to get to school on time.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
What do you find the reason, why are they absent? Is there,
I know there are parents here in the room. I don't want to point the finger at anyone directly, but an elementary school child cannot get themselves to school. A positive of a school bus, we don't have a lot, but a positive is if they get on that bus, they're going to be on time to school. So that's great. Of our almost 900 students, a little over 80% come and go in a car.
okay.
So that's the primary mode for our school. So when you ask me why, a lot of it is because that parent who brings their child in the car isn't bringing them to school, they're taking a vacation, or they're late. We certainly have a tardy issue too, not that I want to bring up
It's all part of it.
other issues, but, they're being addressed. We worked on a program to reduce the tardies last school year, and we weren't real successful, so we stopped doing it. We're not going to keep doing something that's not working to show a positive gain for attendance. I want to go back to, I know the goal for us individually is to instill in kids that when they're coming to this opportunity, they're truly going to have fun, and they're going to wake up and want to come and be at school. But, I know I'm giving you more like my ultimate goal for the school culture.
It's not unusual, to answer your question from a district-wide perspective, because this is an issue in other schools. The kindergartners and first graders, they can't get themselves there. But what's not unusual is to see the fourth and fifth graders walking, and they'll come to school because they can get themselves there. And usually when the oldest child is in fourth or fifth grade and they like school, you'll see they'll bring along the little ones when they're walking. So it's very hard. It's much easier to address, it's never easy to address attendance, but it's much easier to, if there is a point of ease, it is with secondary, where you can have those types of conversations. But with a 5- and 6-year-old, they have to rely on their parent, to come to the school and bring them to the school.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I appreciate your efforts, and I sincerely appreciate the fact that you have some serious challenges to go through. There's no question about that. So thanks again. The question I have is just to put perspective on your customized district support. Just, is any of this recent, or is it, how long has this been in effect?
The teacher on assignment was assigned last year. The experienced secondary assistant principal took place this year. It took place October, around that time. The area superintendent that is working with the smaller number of schools, that took place in July after the grades came out. The lead liaison, I don't know the length of time that.
She has been a liaison there, but her service is intensified. This year.
Yep, okay. So that has increased this year. And the district curriculum support, they would come into the school periodically, but this year it was ramped up because of the grade and trying to work closely with the teachers.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Attorney?
I guess the questions I kind of have are for Sarah Lee. Talking about, and you mentioned, when I look at some of the data and I pull some stuff off the state website, I was going to preface, it seems like the change in the school, there's a correlation between the change in the school and the change in the zoning that occurred in terms of grades. That may not be the only cause. There's also changes with the grading methodology, but from 99 to 2009, South Daytona Elementary had 6 A's, 3 B's, 2 C's. From 2010 to present, we've had 2 A's, 1 B, 3 C's, and 2 D's. Quick question, is there a difference between free lunch, reduced lunch, which indicates on that graph you have was a 77%, but at the state, under economically disadvantaged, South Daytona is at 82%. Is there a difference between economically disadvantaged at the state level and what you, because it's defined as free and reduced lunch, but there's a percentage difference, and I didn't know if there's certain things included.
So one of the things I mentioned was both the enrollment slide as well as the slide referencing the percent of free and reduced lunch is a specific date in time.
Oh, so the states may be different?
I'm quite confident it is different.
Okay.
When you look at the state data, they're taking it from day 100.
Day 100,
And
okay.
day 100 always, almost always is higher, because it reflects what's happened throughout the school year. And many times, applications come in during the school year, whereas day 20 reflects, reflects what's come in since registration.
Okay, so that would be the fluctuation between 77 and 82%.
In all
between the two.
likelihood, yeah.
But the definition of, what the state refers to as economically disadvantaged would be free and reduced lunch, because that was a definition under the state law. I just didn't know what the percentage difference was.
With regard to your comment, I'm not sure you can draw a direct correlation between the attendance boundaries and the school grades. Certainly, we can't do that without really analyzing it. I think part of the problem we've had as a system in the state is the constant change that's occurred with how a grade is created. And in any given year, they have tweaked one or more variables. Ms. Hazel, she really only mentioned the change in a test from FCAT to FSA. But there were a whole lot more changes that occurred in any given year that affected either FCAT or FSA. So I'm not sure that you can draw the conclusion that the attendance boundaries were the reason.
I just said there's a
for the grade.
correlation between it. You know, there's other explanations, but I just see there is a correlation between what occurred before the zoning change and what occurred after the zoning change. It doesn't mean it's a but-for analysis, but that seems to be a changing point in terms of the grades. The area that came into South Daytona in 2009, what school did that go to before?
Horizon,
Horizon?
which is a Port Orange school.
Is it possible is there data that would show how many students attend South Daytona Elementary that live in South Daytona? Is that data that you have? So we could just request that? Okay. The other thing, looking at the state data, one of the things that jumped out at me on the chart is in terms of the economic disproportionate or disadvantage percentage, we're 13th out of 72 schools. Is there 72 schools, including charter schools? Does that sound about right? There's only 12 other schools system-wide that have a higher percentage than South Daytona Elementary. Is it possible to get that data going further back than what you had on your slide? Or is that as far back? I know you said maybe 2007, but...
I'm thinking my office does not have it, which is probably why it wasn't on there.
Okay.
But I don't know that it's
Not
not
available.
able to be
Okay.
obtained.
You're speaking of rank order for our district?
No, just to look at like a history of going back to maybe 99 and just looking at different criteria to see, is there an impact with the school zone change that occurred? Did that impact South Daytona Elementary? I mean, like I said, we only got Ds after that, got more Cs after that, but there are other things that could factor into that, but there may be some data we could look at historically and put together just some trends to see. Because if you look at the charts, the state records, the schools that have a higher percentage than us, or our percentage are higher, so 13-1 in terms of the highest percentage, those are your D schools. There's not a D school that's above us. And there's only one B school in there, the rest are Cs. So that's where your Cs and your Ds, not all the Cs, there's other Cs, but all the D schools are in 13-1. So just like to see if I could look at some more economic data to that type of data to see if I can see any trends. Because just looking at it, that seems to be potentially a turning point. And I'll probably also look to see how has Horizon done since that change. Have they seen what was the impact of that change of taking that area out of Horizon, putting it in South Daytona? How did that impact Horizon? So, no other comments.
One observation real quick. Tom, I know you and I mentioned it, but we've got the school board's audience, and Carl, we're one of those schools that provide an SRO. And from what we could tell from the activity report in our meeting with your staff, we're hoping you'll consider to help participate in the funding next year for that SRO. For 3 years, I think we were able to do the heavy lifting.
Right.
Okay. And that was, and of course, thank you. And by the way, while your bosses are here, Tom's been very receptive. He's been available. He's been accommodating. And to me, that's just fresh, and we thank you.
Yes, much like.
I just want to...
Would the board member, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say one more thing. First of all, I do want to tell the teachers how much we appreciate the principal. I know how hard all of you work. I get such good reports from especially the parents in my neighborhood. I think it's nothing we can change, I guess, but I think it's so sad that so much depends on these tests. And you go from FCAT, and then I guess this new one, which, I mean, it's a shame because you have to teach for the test. And I guess my question is, I know that we seem to have an increase of ESC, and I think you mentioned emotionally, so the school is a Title I. Are those children who are actually exceptional, are all of their test grades also included in that, in the average?
Yes.
So we have an increase of emotionally handicapped children and ESC children, and that could also be a factor in a lower grade, because tell the state that does not make sense. I mean, really.
No, we try. We try to tell the state
I'd like to give y'all the opportunity. I mean, we seem to capitalize the first hour, so I'd sure like to turn it over to y'all.
And so we do thank you for asking for the meeting, legitimate questions, and some of the reasons why at our level we actually had discussion about our large elementary schools, because South Daytona is the largest two of our middle schools. I have middle schools around the same amount of students. So for us, we want to make sure, I definitely want to make sure all our schools succeed, not just South Daytona, but every school. But South Daytona is in my district, so I'm always concerned with the schools in my district. But another thing, I'm not sure, and when you talk to the Rotary and the Chamber about mentoring, and I don't know if they have established a mentoring program that they could actually go into the schools, if nothing but once a week for 30 minutes, because that is life-changing. Some students don't have that role model, or they may have a role model, but someone or a job that they're interested in. Having mentors at the school level are very beneficial, very beneficial. So I would say, in talking to your colleagues, if they want to, and if they can't, if they have people in their offices that are willing to mentor, if they would allow them to have 30 minutes a week to just go to the school and mentor a child or a group of children, can make a world of difference.
I was making notes there, I wasn't ignoring
Oh,
you.
no, that's fine.
We recently, in the last couple of years, Bob Davis from Motel and Hotel Lodging, he started an Adopt a School program. What if your city adopted these students? And she and I were talking about the mentoring and making that impact. Some of them are extended day, so they're still there while their parents work. As a parent of 3, it was very hard to come in at 6 o'clock and then do homework. The kids had already forgotten about it. And what if somebody stepped in to help those kids right after school on campus and became that mentor and that role model? And we talked about incentivizing. Feel free to make up prizes as they go to school. You know, as a city, feel free to think of creative ways. I asked a teacher when I first came in 2014 how much money would make a difference each month, because I had adopted a classroom idea. And I thought, wow, what if, and you know, we came up with something as small as $25 a month would make this drastic difference, because she could buy those prizes. She could give them extra little tokens and trinkets. Today we listened to a training by an author that was phenomenal, and it was called Humanizing the Education Machine. And if we're not careful, we turn this into something that none of us can fix. You know, you're asking for how do we do this, and believe me, we're talking about this all the time. How do we make school fun when there's so many rules that every minute is dictated? You know, how do we, and that's legislated outside of us. We may have a nearly $1 billion budget, but we only control 12%, you know, as a school board. So we need to figure out creative ways, and it's not just about the money. It's about, in Nashville, Tennessee, they have the academies in Nashville. I took a tour. And what's happened is they're doing wall-to-wall academies. This is at a high school level, but they've got 300 kids on a waiting list to get in some of these public schools because they're so phenomenal. I would love to see that for South Daytona. You know, I've been one that I've lovingly said I'm a proponent of parental choice of where their students go. I just want them to choose us. I want to have something so good that they're clamoring to get into these schools. And that takes a whole community. It can't just be a worn-out staff that's doing everything. As a parent, I had to get involved to help them. Now as a school member, I'm back to involved in the board and in the classroom, volunteering my time. We have to fight for these kids. And you ask why they don't come. She said it very tactfully, but I'm in medicine and I'm not always tactful. It's the adults around them. The end. Whether it be a parent or a guardian or an uncle, an aunt, a grandparent. I've had calls from parents that can't bring their child to school because of their medical diagnoses. So then we're now problem solving to get those kids to school, to figure it out. So it really does take the entire community to elevate, and I'm very grateful that you called this meeting, truly, because it brings attention and it causes us to all step back and own what's our part in it, but also to start creating new ways. So I do thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, I want to thank all the parents for being here. Yay. I was a former principal, and so I realize I'm about, my schools were always as good as the amount of parent involvement that I had. And while there were some of you here, there were a whole bunch that are not here. I'm sure they all have a lot of good reasons, but you know, there's not a lot of parents that could benefit perhaps from hearing some of this that are not here. Just a couple of points I wanted to touch on that were brought up. One was the absenteeism, and I will tell you that it starts early. It starts in pre-K. Child's sort of sick, maybe sick. Mommy says, "Oh, just stay home." Okay. I'm not feeling too well. Tummy hurts. Okay, stay home. Okay, pretty soon, kid figures it out. I tell mom, I'm not feeling quite so good. Stay home. Well, it happens then in kindergarten. And one day turns into 2, turns into 4. And so we have parents that start to enable children to kind of tell them whether they're going to school or not. When I was a kid, it wasn't an option. Go to school. I mean, unless you're absolutely dying, you are going to school, and I was never dying, so I never missed a day of school. So, you know, school attendance was not an option, and I don't know why it's become an option now, but it really needs to be hammered home early, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, because that's where it starts. That's where it starts. As far as the grading of the schools, you know, we hate it. And school board members, do you think it's our idea to be grading our schools? No. And the way they're graded, that's not our idea. No one asked us, how do you think we should come up with the grade for the schools? The state legislature knows best. So they come up with how to grade the schools, and 90% of that grade is based on those test scores that you and I know as former educators is just a small piece of what happens at South Daytona Elementary School. Think of all the great things that are going on every day at South Daytona Elementary School, but they are not reflected in that school grade. That school grade is just a sliver of what students did on a couple of tests on a couple of days. That's it. And the case in point is, if 3 students had scored a little bit better, we wouldn't even be having this meeting, because you all would have been a C school. And if 5 or 6 students scored better, you'd be a B school. And then we'd all be having a party here, I guess. So, I mean, it's so ridiculous that so much emphasis is really placed on these grades. But I also realize, as a principal, how much that grade hurts when that grade isn't reflective of what you and I know goes on at 600 Elizabeth Place. I mean, and that's what makes you so mad. The other thing I want to just leave you with is that, as a parent, what's most important to you is whether your child is happy going to school, whether your child comes home happy, whether your child wants to go to school. Is your child learning at school? Do you have a good relationship with your child's teacher? Does your teacher like your child? You know, these are things that really matter, not the school's grade. You got to be concerned about your children. And I remember when my nieces and nephews went to Campbell, and I remember my sister calling me and said, I don't know whether my kid should go to Campbell. You know, I hear all this stuff about Campbell. And I go, I don't care what you hear about Campbell. I say, get your child in with a good teacher, and everything is going to be fine at Campbell. So all three of my nieces and nephews, they all went to Campbell. They all loved Campbell. They all loved their teachers. They all went to the mainland. They all graduated at the top of their class. So it wasn't about Campbell. It was about what is that child putting into it, who was their child's teacher, how much did my sister help that child's teacher. There's a lot of things going on that we can just say, I can't control it, or I've nothing to do with it. If you're concerned about your child's education, then you got to step up. You got to help that child, your child's teacher. You got to get in there, make that classroom the absolute best. And if your child is happy to go to school, and she sees that you're happy with the school, all this stuff kind of rubs off, and your child will achieve at a level in which you'll be pleased. And you know what? If a few other parents would do that, 600 Elizabeth Place would be that grade A school, which you and I know that it should be. Thank you for letting us come here today. Got it. Yay! Well, teachers can be parents too. I mean, come on.
Is, y'all good with opening it up to the public? Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? We'd like to limit you to 3 minutes.
Should I not speak?
Thank you, Sarah Lee. Didn't mean to chase you out of your chair there.
I can go. Oh, I just wanted to
Please, please come up. Please come up and state your name, please.
For the record, thank you.
I have to be official. Do I need to introduce myself?
Yes.
I'm Veda Lay. I teach 3rd grade at South Daytona. This is my 2nd year teaching there. And I just wanted to piggyback on her mentoring comment, because grades are important and our learning is important, but there's only so much you can get a kid to care about math when they're not eating dinner. Or I had a student today tell me his dad went to jail before Christmas, and that's not odd. Like, I have 16 students, 9 of them don't have father figures. That's because 5 of them are in jail, in prison, and they're seeing this stuff every day. You know, his house got raided by SWAT. He's 8. You know, so it's like we can worry about their grades, but these kids don't see beyond that. You know, it's like we want them to grow, but when they don't see that there's more to life than that, they're not going to want to work in school. They're not going to, you know, try harder because they don't think there's anything else. So that's why we need people in the community to show them that there are people out there, there are things outside of what they see in their everyday life, because their lives are traumatic at 8, 9. You know, they don't know when they're going to eat. Talking about kids not coming to school. I have an 8-year-old who's responsible for getting up his little brother who's 6, getting them dressed, getting them to school without any parental help, without their parents don't wake them up. They don't have an alarm clock. He's just supposed to wake up. And that's common. You know, I've taught for 2 years and I've had several situations like that. So they need emotional support. They need to know that, you know, not just I care about them or they care about them or their principal, but they need to see that there are people in the community that also want them to do good in life, that there's more than just what they see every day.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please.
My name is Vinny Dappio. Carl Persis was actually my Spruce Creek Elementary principal who disciplined me in my first fist fight in a Florida public school, of course.
That year was 89.
You remember. But needless to say, I went on to reform myself after that. I was the 1999 Volusia County Student VIPS Volunteer of the Year at the student level. And I went on to get the Bright Future Scholarship locally here, went to UCF. I love local education. I love our teachers. I love our city council. I love our school board. I'm very, 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 very fortunate because of the opportunities that were given to me through our public school departments here that I was able to get self-educated, and my daughter is one of the fortunate ones that is not in the 77%. At that need. And we've had time after again, we could put her in Warner, we could put her in, what's the one, the Catholic school, we could move to Port Orange. What keeps me in the school district here is that I truly believe the most important thing that the kid actually gets is in South Daytona, you guys have the most diverse representative population. Now, I mean, that creates difficulties. That explains a lot of the problems. But the reality is I see my daughter growing up in a world where these kids who are sheltered away in Ormond and in Port Orange, they're not going to be the leaders of the future. So when you talk about what the community can do is, I'd say put out two messages. And the message is the strength that we have in our community, because it's a growing pain now. But South Daytona, because of that diverse population, you're actually giving the children the best possible training for the future. We all know the realities. The kids that grow up to be the engineers, they learn those skills in college, and then Boeing tells them to forget what they learned at schools and retrain them. What's going to give these kids the best opportunity is the fact that South Daytona has the most diverse population in West Volusia, or in East, if not West Volusia. But when I was hearing what you were just saying, and I see it every day, I see Officer Tony, I pick my kid up. I'm in the Watchdog Dad program, which is phenomenal. And it breaks my heart that there's only four pictures on that wall of how few people participate. But to get what it is, I'd say, speaking from my generation, it's kind of a culture of hopelessness. Most of the people I grew up with in this town that are friends of mine and dear friends who have kids, I mean, they have drug problems, they have work problems. So it's too late for them. I mean, that doesn't sound optimistic, but we have to do everything, I guess, that's possible to just put awareness out of school is the way out of that. You know, instead of, we don't want to turn into the Bronx where kids go, well, mom or dad is in jail, so I'll go to jail. You know, I grew up in an immigrant family, and it was you go to school so you don't go to jail the way that grandpa did or the way that the aunt or the uncle. And Mayor Hall, I know with the law enforcement background, you definitely know, right, prevention is the main thing. But I look at it and I actually see those scores, and I know that's the reason I switched out of education as my major into psychology and economics, and now I'm a businessman, God help us. But I honestly really, really believe, because the teachers and the administration can't say these things, you know, because of the state and the political correctness, but I just believe it's fundamentally probably a message of hopelessness that's probably coming from at home. I mean, I've literally dealt with like students in special needs demographics where they're just told, learning ain't for you, you know, like it's just not, you're supposed to just fail. This is what life is. Dad was a failure, you're supposed to be a failure. Mom dropped out, you're supposed to drop out. So I would say, if anything, whatever kind of message we could get out to show the strength in our diversity and how these kids are going to have the opportunity to grow up as the leaders of tomorrow. But man, they start falling off after about 5th grade. Just look at the statistics. American students are just as competitive with everyone else in the world until 5th grade. Then in middle school and high school, all of a sudden the performance plummets and it drops off. But we've got to get the message to them. And again, I don't think it's a magic test. I think it's just being positive pillars of the community. But I just wanted to say the things that I know people can't say because, you know, it's government and stuff. But, you know, like I said, I'm fortunate enough to not be in that 77%, and I choose to keep my daughter here because I know the reality of growing up, it's going to be a different world. And I think that's a message of strength we could actually get to the community, because it's a cycle, right, Mayor? Here's what happens. All of a sudden, the school grade goes down. So what happens? The parents who are looking to move here for new work opportunities, they're going to move to Ormond. They're going to move to Port Orange. Now we're not getting that tax base. Now there's less money for the city to have. Then all of a sudden, it's a double whammy. There's also not those parents with the better jobs moving here, so the new restaurants don't open. The new car dealerships don't open. Now the city's not getting the residential taxes, the city's not getting the commercial taxes, and then on top of it, the grades go down, the property values goes down, and then the tax base dwindles even more. I mean, we can get to the point that we can tax people at 100%, but if nobody moves here, it doesn't make a difference. So I see everybody's points, and this is amazing, guys. This is America. You know, this is like really how it happens. So, God bless all of you, but I just think this is
You all are. So good. Anyone else? Mr. Russell?
Thank you for this opportunity, and I will return.
Thank you. At this time, we'll adjourn our workshop. Thank you. All being here.